Hello, dear students. I hope you're doing good. Welcome to session number 4. We would be talking about work motivation in this session. However, I hope that this online methodology is suiting you, and I hope to be back by next session. So, as I had promised, that if you have any queries or any doubts, I will be happy to answer that from the next session onwards. Meanwhile, let's move ahead with this session, which is a continuity in a way of last session where we were discussing about your attitudes, right? And different types of commitments. We discussed about affective commitment, normative commitment, and continuous commitment. And we also discussed that if an organization has to build loyalty with its employees, it should also ensure that the affective commitment, which is the emotional degree of attachment with the employer, should be relatively high. And that brings us to this topic of work motivation, where we have to understand the basic human behavior of how can we keep our employees consistently motivated, but at the same time trying to understand different factors and different theories of work motivation, which can give us insights into this human behavior, right? So when we talk about work motivation, there are three things which are very crucial at a workplace, which ensures that employees would be motivated or not. So one thing is the energization. When we're talking about energization, it's basically speaking about how committed and how driven you are to do a particular task. Do you really feel that every day you go to the work and you're determined to do that task or not? The second thing is direction, which means whether you know that you are going in the direction where this direction is giving you clarity, but also this direction gives you the sense of enthusiasm of doing the work, right? Often you will be involved in a project in which you really don't know what would be the outcome of the project, but you know that this direction of the project in which it is going, it's amazing, and that keeps you energized. Let's say you are developing an innovative product. You really don't know whether that product is going to be successful or not, but that product is really going to be innovative. That can really change the way consumers would use a particular product. And you know that it's an exciting direction to go, right? So this is where energization and direction comes into picture. And the last thing is the sustenance of a behavior, which brings us back to the employee attitude. Are you able to sustain the same attitude of being committed to your employer or to the project, which will consistently ensure that you are doing that work with complete dedication, right? So this is where the stability, or you can say the sustainable behavior of of your commitment and your attitude is linked with direction and energization, and that ensures that you would be motivated or driven in your workplace. Now let's have a look at a couple of theories, and I think these theories are really interesting, just to get basic insights into the human behavior and how organizations can understand that these are the dimensions which we need to keep in mind to motivate our employees. So there are four theories. These are not rocket science theories. These are very simple theories, and there is nothing complicated about it. Okay. And these are known as managing expectations, managing perceptions, understanding needs, and managing goals. Now let's go through these one by one. The first theory, okay, is the theory of managing expectation. Okay? And the theory of management expectations says that employees are usually estimating regarding their capacity to do a particular work. Okay? And when they do a particular work, that leads to a certain outcome. And if that outcome is positive, and if your employee rewards that positive outcome, then you are motivated. That leads to instrumentality. Okay. Now, let's take a very simple example and look at this diagram. Okay, forget about the numbers. Okay, now managing expectations says that you are always estimating if you want to do this work or not. So let's say you are given a task. Okay, your task is to work on an assignment. Okay, and if you do that well, then you will get a good marks, and probably you will get a very good grades in your final exam, right? So you know that in theory you have not performed that task yet. You are expecting to do that. So based on your expectancy, which means that based on your capacity, on your judgment, you do the task. Okay. Now let that task leads to a particular outcome, which is in this case a productivity increase. That task will give you certain results. So you have decided to do an assignment, you did that assignment, and you have the result. The result is you get a good score. Okay, the result is a good score, and you feel committed by that. You feel happy. Now the onus lies on me, which means I as a teacher, how do I decide to praise you with that score? So I would say, guys, this is a really good assignment, and I think you should really present it in front of the class and show the good work you have done, or I give you an additional marks. Okay, so that is the promotion, which means your effort has been rewarded. Okay, and that reward makes you motivated again to do the next effort. So put it in simple way. If an employee is doing a certain task and management needs to get that task done, then management should also ensure that that task is rewarded. So you work on a project, the project is successful, you feel happy about it, but management should also ensure that the success of that project is rewarded with some financial or social incentives. And that promise of giving a reward leads to the valence, which means an intrinsic desire and an emotional state, which makes employee to recommit to the work or to the company he is working in. Is that clear? Okay. So managing expectations in a simple way is all about how you manage the expectations of employees, expectations in the sense that if they do a good work, they will be rewarded, and the company should ensure that they would be rewarded and not betrayed. So they should be rewarded either financially, non-financially, or by various perks and programs. And those rewards, the rewards which were promised by the companies, they will further generate the motivation to do the task again. So that is the theory of managing expectations. Now let's look at the second theory. It's a very interesting theory. It's the theory of managing perception. Uh, so this theory is somewhat which all of us would have witnessed in our schools or in exams, and even when some of you are doing internships, right? So the theory says that we as individuals, we are trying to compare our individual input and individual output with the inputs of others and outputs of others. So clearly in terms of exams, you if you're working with a friend and let's say you worked hard and another person didn't work hard, and suddenly you find that he is getting a better grade, you are wondering how did that happen, right? So you are comparing your input with others input and your output with others output. So in organizational context, it can often happen that let's say you did more work and another person didn't do that much work and he takes the cake, or you did a good amount of work compared to others and you want to have recognition for that. So this is clearly creating a sort of psychological discomfort which could restore um, the equity, which means that if you are in this discomfort position, specifically in the case of internships, where you are given this promise that if you do well during your internship, then you will get a permanent job, there is this psychological discomfort created, which leads you to work more and which gives you that motivation so that you should be working more to establish that equity state and to ensure that your employer should give you the permanent job. So what we are trying to do is that your discomfort position is driving you, but from the employer side, employer should also understand that they are creating the psychological discomfort. So they should equally reward those psychological discomfort by recognizing that the work you are doing is appreciated. So the role of the employer here is to also ensure that the output which your employer is giving back to you as a result of your input is equally valued. So as you can see, it's a classical argument that underpayment and overworking is more motivating than overpayment and underworking. That means that the people are more sensitive towards losing than towards gaining because of injustice. So we talked about it, that the psychological discomfort is created because you don't want to lose anything, and you want to really ensure that your position in the organization is maintained. So you want to work hard to ensure that you prove your point. Okay. Now let's look at the next theory, which is known as Herzberg's theory. And Herzberg did a very interesting job. He interviewed employees of a particular company to understand what are the factors which keep people happy and unhappy at the work. Okay. So he determined two sets of factors. Now, those factors could be classified as hygiene factors and motivator factors. So he says that the hygiene factors are related to the aspect of work environment, okay, and motivator factors are related to job content. So what are the hygiene factors here? In generally, they could be classified as supervision, your interpersonal relations, salary, job status, personal life, working conditions. Motivator factors are more related intrinsically, so your achievement, recognition, possibility of growing to a different position in a company, how you advance in your career, the sort of responsibility you have, and whether you like the job or not. So what Herzberg is trying to say is an organization should try to meet these both factors. However, in this case, if you meet the condition of hygiene factors, these are the minimum criteria to ensure that employees are motivated. On the other hand, if you don't meet motivators, if you don't recognize employees, if you don't give them possibilities to grow, and if you don't give them promotions, then they won't be motivated, right? So here we need to know that an organization should at least try to minimum level keep the hygiene factors and meet the hygiene factors, which is general environment of the company. Let's say it could be very much related to your work desk, the freedom to work from your home or from your office. Okay, they give you decent salary, but more than that, they need to ensure that they recognize your work. They give you the sense of achievement and they kind of keep on challenging your capacity and give you the tools to ensure that you are learning new things and you're taking different roles and responsibilities in the organization. So you need to meet hygiene factors, but more than that, you need to meet motivator factors. If motivator factors are not met, that can lead to dissatisfaction. So that's just a general description about hygiene factors and motivator factors. Okay. Let's go to the next theory, and I think most of you would be well aware about this. It's the goal setting theory. And the goal setting theory says that you need to ensure that so the goal setting theory talks about that you employees or an organization or even a team should ensure that the goals they keep or the objectives they keep for the employees are motivating enough. So what are the criteria that the goals should be generally accepted by the team? They should be difficult or challenging in a way. that it challenges the capacity of employees to achieve it, but at the same time, they should be specific, and the organization or the team should also ensure that there is a process of a constructive feedback for the goal achievement, right? Now, it's very interesting to see that I don't know if you know about Peter Drucker. Uh, he talked a lot about management by objectives, which is MBO, right? And management by objectives specifically talks about this, that if an organization has to sustain and has to grow in an economy, then it should ensure that it should use a goal setting approach. So you can easily transpose the example of goal setting or managing goal setting theory in a sales job. A salesperson has a very typical target to achieve. Okay, so let's say you talk about um, a person who is trying to sell a particular thing or an object, and he has an objective to sell at least 50 pieces per day. If he does that, then he will be having he will be given some much more perks by that. But whether selling this 50 thing is interesting or not, that is something very much dependent upon what he is selling and how the organization is ensuring that the conditions for him to sell those things are relevant or not. And at the same time, if that organization is also helping him to understand that how you can make a better sales pitch, right? And that brings me back to a very interesting discussion. A friend of mine who is now working in a biotech sector, internationally, started his career back in sales. After completing his biotech, he did his MBA, and he did his MBA specifically in marketing. And I asked him, "You are a guy from biotech. Why do you want to do your MBA in marketing?" And he said, "Actually, I had a conversation with one of my mentors, and he said that if you really want to work in an organization, if you really want to understand how business works, then you have to start working in sales." So the first job he actually started doing was going in and selling these medical samples, like the samples of medicines to doctors. So all of his time was actually spent on the ground, going and meeting different doctors, often waiting in line, and then trying to convince them that they should be using these medicines. So the job is challenging, it's not easy, but it gives you the ground reality about what is the consumer perception. Anyways, that was very much motivating for him, and this job of sales has finally led him to a global management position where he is managing at least three portfolios, which is about consulting health organizations in Algeria, Egypt, China, and some other Middle East countries. So that's a good example, in my opinion, to understand that goal setting theory is really interesting way of seeing how do you want to set goals in your group. In your case, if you're working on a movie, then you really want to understand that what are the shared goals, by what is our common deadline, uh, um, how do we ensure that we are giving each other consistent feedback if we are faltering in our planning process? Are we really doing something interesting that kind of challenges our capacity? And do we really accept the timeline, so that we all are aware that we have to achieve this particular task within a specified amount of time, right? However, there is also a negative impact of goal setting theory, which means that too much of pressure can give rise to unethical behavior. It can reduce cooperativeness, and it may detract you from non-goal areas. Now, that's a very classical example. Mm, You may be interested, and you can note this name of the bank, Wells Fargo, WELLS space FARGO. Just type in Google Wells Fargo scam, and you will be able to see that how goal setting theory has inevitably led to a major scam in financial industry, where Wells Fargo created fake accounts just to ensure that they remain in profitability. So that's an interesting case to see that goal setting could be interesting, but it can be dangerous as well. Finally, we come to the conclusion that is only motivation educate for performance. Uh, and we come to realize that it's good to have committed employees, but we need employees who have abilities, who have technical skills, and who are able to ensure that how they see a particular task being done. So this model, which is basically, you can say, based on the first theory about managing expectation, says that motivation is not only a prerequisite just for the sake that you need to have motivated employees. That doesn't make any sense, because you want to have people who are motivated, but that motivation should lead to something concrete, right? So motivation should is equally coupled with your abilities, your traits, your technical skills, which is determining your performance, and that performance uh, determines how you perceive rewards and how you perceive satisfaction. And based on that, you again redo your effort and task. So motivation is, of course, linked to your attitude. It is linked to how you do your effort. It is linked to how organizations create sufficient conditions and policies to ensure that you are motivated, but it also is linked to your abilities, your technical abilities on how you perform your task. So these are some advices on how organizations can ensure that the employees are motivated, give them clear goals, provide necessary conditions, identify the needs of the teams of individual employees, give them constructive feedback, ensure that they are rewarded, and make fair process to ensure that the reward allocation is clear. Now, to end with that, I would really recommend you to watch these two videos, especially the one with Dan Pink. It's an excellent way to ensure to see that what organizations can do from the perspective of autonomy and mastery, and what motivates employees to, to, to do a purposeful job. And then after watching that video and after having gone through the slides, you can choose your group work, either option one, you can discuss these questions, or you can discuss these questions based on the article which has been uploaded on the Blackboard. So that's it for employee motivation session. I hope to see you in the next session. I will be in school hopefully by next week. And yes, looking forward to see you. Thank you very much.